There is something they never told you. Something that has been deliberately hidden beneath layers of noise, digital distraction, and carefully engineered illusions designed to keep you circling the same psychological drain, lifetime after lifetime, scroll after scroll. What if the reason you feel disconnected, exhausted, and spiritually hollow is not a personal failure? What if it is by design? You are living behind a veil of simulated ego structures that separate you from your true power. These internal barriers are the only things standing between you and the gateway of the Pleroma right now. And today, we are going to dismantle every single one of them. Stay with me because what I am about to share with you is going to permanently change the way you understand yourself, your reality, and the extraordinary nature of what you actually are. Before we go any deeper, I want you to understand something critical. The journey we are about to take together is not philosophical entertainment. This is not abstract spirituality designed to make you feel good for 15 minutes and then evaporate. Everything we are going to cover today is a practical, layered map for genuine soul integration, and at every single stage of this video, you are going to receive tools, frameworks, and transmissions of understanding that you can apply the moment this video ends. That is my promise to you. So let us begin where everything always begins. At the source of the problem. The matrix of false identity. Most people walking through the world in 2026 believe they know who they are. They have a name, a career, a social media presence, a carefully curated set of opinions and aesthetics that they identify as the self. But here is the devastating truth that ancient Gnostic wisdom has always pointed toward. That entire construction, every layer of it, is an artificial skin draped over something ancient, luminous, and unbreakable. It is not your real identity. It is a mask so sophisticated that it has learned to breathe. The Gnostics called the architects of this false reality the Archons. Cosmic forces not of malice in the human sense, but of limitation. Structures that exist to maintain a particular frequency of consciousness, one that keeps the divine spark, what they call the Pneuma, or the breath of the true God, asleep inside the material world. These structures are not just metaphysical. In 2026, they have a very physical address, and that address is your phone screen, your algorithmic feed, and the relentless attention economy that has turned human consciousness into a consumable resource. Think about what has happened to collective psychology in the last decade. We are now living inside environments that are engineered with neuroscientific precision to generate specific emotional loops. Outrage, desire, inadequacy, validation hunger. These are not random feelings. They are harvested frequencies. And every time you participate in that loop unconsciously, another layer of artificial conditioning wraps itself around your essential self like psychic scar tissue. The digital landscape of 2026 does not just distract you. It actively participates in the construction of what we might call parasitic ego structures, identity formations that are built not from genuine self-discovery but from algorithmic mirroring and social comparison. The simulation uses specific frequencies to maintain your spiritual amnesia. Fear is the foundational one. But it is supplemented by the frequency of chronic urgency, the belief that you are always behind, always missing something, always one click away from the life that would finally feel real. This keeps the nervous system in a constant low-grade emergency state, which is precisely the vibrational range in which higher dimensional awareness cannot register. You cannot hear a whisper in a thunderstorm. That is the genius and the cruelty of the design. But here is where it gets interesting. Because knowing the design of the cage is the first step to finding the door. The alchemy of internal integration. Now, I need you to shift a perspective that has probably been holding you back for years, maybe your entire adult life. Trauma is not a permanent scar. It is dense lead. And the entire science of Gnostic alchemy, which is an internal science of transformation that predates modern psychology by centuries, tells us that lead can be transmuted into gold. This is not metaphor. This is a functional map for what happens inside the human psyche when integration occurs. Every traumatic experience that has not been fully processed does not disappear. It goes underground. It becomes what psychologists call a complex and what esoteric traditions call a fragmented aspect of soul. These fragments do not just cause emotional pain. They create what I want you to think of as leaks in your sovereign frequency. They are places where your vital life force, your prana, your chi, your pneumatic essence, is being constantly siphoned away. Not necessarily by malevolent external entities, though the tradition does speak of this, but by the unresolved loops of the past that your psyche is still trying to complete. Here is a practical way to identify your leaks. Notice where in your life you are chronically depleted. Not just tired, but specifically drained. Relationships that require you to constantly diminish yourself. Creative impulses that you suppress before they even reach the surface. Emotional triggers that send you into states completely disproportionate to what actually happened. Each of these is a signpost pointing to a fragmented aspect that is consuming energy to maintain its suppression. The psyche is spending enormous resources keeping these parts locked in the basement. And that energy is not available for ascension. It is not available for the work of accessing higher states of consciousness. It is entirely consumed by internal management of what the Gnostics would recognize as the counterfeit reality operating inside your own mind. The process of reclaiming these suppressed aspects is what creates what I call a unified field. When the fragmented parts of the psyche are brought into conscious relationship with each other, something extraordinary happens. The internal noise drops dramatically. The signal clarity increases. And suddenly the individual mind becomes capable of receiving transmissions that the matrix, both internal and external, was successfully blocking before. A unified psyche is not just healthier in the psychological sense. It is a fundamentally different instrument of perception. It can detect frequencies that the fragmented psyche cannot access. This is why soul healing is not optional on the path to the Pleroma. It is the path. And I want to pause here because we are at the midpoint of this journey together and I want to make sure you have everything you need. If this content is resonating with you, if you are feeling the pull of recognition because some part of you has always known this, then make sure you hit subscribe and turn on notifications because we go into these territories regularly and what we cover next week connects directly to what we are building toward today. Now, let us continue because we are about to go into the most practically powerful section of this entire video. Dismantling the simulated ego barriers. I want to draw a distinction that is absolutely essential and that most spiritual content completely glosses over. There is a functional ego and there is what we might call the Archontic Mask. And confusing them is one of the most common traps on any genuine spiritual path. The functional ego is necessary. It is the operating system that allows you to navigate three-dimensional reality, maintain relationships, pay rent, and communicate with other human beings. The goal is not to destroy it. Anyone who tells you to dissolve the ego entirely is selling you a trap, because a person with no functional ego structure is not enlightened. They are simply unprotected and unable to act in the world. The Archontic Mask is something else entirely. It is the artificial layer that has grown over the functional ego through years of conditioning, performance, and psychic defense. It is the self you constructed to be acceptable, to survive your environment, to be loved by people who had conditions attached to their love. It is the identity you perform rather than inhabit. And here is what makes the digital landscape of 2026 particularly dangerous in this regard. Social platforms function as mirror traps. They reflect your performed identity back to you with metrics, with engagement numbers, with algorithmic validation or suppression. And the brain, which evolved to care deeply about social belonging, treats this reflection as reality. As truth. As you. This creates recursive thought loops. You perform, the algorithm responds, you adjust the performance based on the response, the algorithm shapes the next response, and the loop tightens. What you are left with is a consciousness that is literally looping in on itself, unable to make genuinely original contact with reality because every perception is filtered through the question of how it would play in the simulation. This is mirror trap architecture. And it is astonishingly effective at preventing the kind of deep interiority that genuine spiritual development requires. So how do you break the loop? This is where what I call psychic defragging becomes essential. And I am going to give you a concrete framework for this right now. The process has 3 phases. The first is stillness induction. Not meditation in the generic sense, but a specific practice of sitting with the discomfort of not performing. No phone. No content. No ambient noise. Just you and whatever arises in the silence. What arises in those first 5 to 10 minutes is your defragging process beginning. The psyche starts to surface what it has been suppressing. This will often feel uncomfortable. That is the lead beginning to move. The second phase is witness orientation. You observe what arises without attempting to fix, suppress, or narrate it into a spiritual framework. The witness is not the judge. The witness is simply the part of you that can perceive the internal landscape without being consumed by it. Cultivating this witness state is essentially cultivating the divine spark's capacity to observe the construct it is temporarily inhabiting. And the third phase is intentional return. After sitting with whatever has surfaced, you consciously reorient toward a quality rather than a thought. gratitude, wonder, or simply the felt sense of being alive and breathing. This reorientation begins to dissolve the barrier between the individual mind and what the Gnostics call the collective spark. The shared pneumatic essence that connects all awakening consciousness across the simulation. This is not theory. Practice it consistently and you will begin to feel the difference in a matter of days. The dissolution of the simulation. We are not talking about a distant future. We are talking about what is happening right now in May 2026, in the months and years immediately ahead, in the frequency field of this civilization that is visibly cracking at every institutional seam. What does it look and feel like when an artificial frequency grid begins to collapse? Because this is what we are in the midst of. The symptoms are both physical and metaphysical. Physically, you may be experiencing unusual fatigue that is not resolved by sleep, heightened sensory sensitivity, or strange electromagnetic sensations that you cannot attribute to anything medically specific. Metaphysically, you may be noticing that synchronicities are accelerating, that your dream life has intensified dramatically, and that your tolerance for low-frequency environments, manipulative people, meaningless noise, has dropped to nearly zero. These are not signs of breakdown. They are signs of recalibration. Your system is upgrading its sensitivity in response to the shift in the field. But here is the dimension of this that the most important. As the artificial grid weakens and the collective undergoes this disorienting reconfiguration, those who have done the internal integration work become something extraordinary. They become bridges. The rebuilt vessel, the psyche that has done the alchemical work of integrating its fragments, does not just benefit personally from the shift. It becomes a stabilizing signal in the chaos. It demonstrates through lived embodiment that coherent consciousness is possible even in the middle of collective disorientation. You become a tuning fork for others who are waking up but have no framework for what is happening to them. This is the Gnostic understanding of the pneumatic human in action. Not retreating from the world, but functioning as a living transmission within it. The divine spark, having been reclaimed through integration and shielded through the dismantling of the Archontic Mask, is now capable of inhabiting a new frequency of reality. What some traditions call the organic timeline, the experience of life uncorrupted by the simulation's interference. This is not a physical place. It is a state of coherent resonance that you carry with you into every interaction, every moment of creation, every relationship. Accessing the divine Pleroma. We have arrived at the destination this entire journey has been pointing toward. The Pleroma. In authentic Gnostic cosmology, the Pleroma is not a place. It is not a heaven in the religious sense. It is the state of absolute fullness. The condition of reality as it exists beyond the artificial construct, beyond the demiurge's imitation world, beyond the recursive loops of the simulation. It is the source and the totality of unconditioned being. The Gnostics believe that the divine spark, the Pneuma, originally emerged from the Pleroma and that its entire journey through matter and forgetfulness and awakening is ultimately a return to that original fullness. Here is what this means practically, and this is the most important thing I will say in this entire video. A healed psyche is not just a happier psyche. It is a fundamentally different resonance chamber. When the internal fragmentation has been resolved, when the Archontic Mask has been recognized and released, when the leaks in the sovereign frequency have been sealed through integration, the individual consciousness becomes naturally conductive to what I can only describe as divine intelligence flowing back into the physical realm. The Pleroma does not need to be reached by traveling somewhere. It needs to be received. And reception requires a cleared, coherent, unified instrument. This is what every genuine mystical tradition has always been pointing toward through wildly different symbolic systems and cultural languages. The clearing of the internal instrument so that what is already eternally present can actually be registered. The Pleroma is not absent from your life. It is simply blocked by the noise of the unintegrated psyche and the interference of the artificial frequency field. Remove the interference and the signal is simply there. It always was. Living as a sovereign conduit of light is not an advanced spiritual achievement reserved for monks or mystics or those who have spent decades in retreat. It is the natural state of a human consciousness that has done the honest, unglamorous, alchemical work of integrating its own fractured interior. It is available to you. It is available now. And the moment you begin that work in earnest, the cycle of fragmentation begins to end. Not because the world suddenly becomes easy or the simulation politely switches itself off, but because you are no longer feeding it with the frequency of your own unresolved interior. You have returned, piece by piece, fragment by reclaimed fragment, to the eternal whole from which the spark never truly departed. That is the Gnostic truth. That is the nature of the journey you are already on, whether you knew it before today or not. And now you have a map. If this opens something in you, if you feel the recognition of what we covered today, the video on your screen right now goes even deeper into the specific alchemical practices for reclaiming your divine spark, and I genuinely believe it is one of the most important things we have created on this channel. Click it now, watch it all the way through, and let us continue this work together.